I'm wearing a silly black hat with a couple of saucers attached to it as we look at some of the early Disney games on the Mega Drive, or as it's known in North America, the Genesis. Disney and the Mega Drive went together pretty well, really. Some of the best film licenses of the 16-bit era was Aladdin and The Lion King, which were far from shabby. Of course, the first Disney games to hit the Mega Drive were not farmed out to Virgin Games, but were made by Sega themselves. It's quite interesting that early on in the life of the Mega Drive, Sega chose to buy a Disney license, because technically, the world of Walt didn't really fit with what Sega of America had in mind. The plan was to market the Mega Drive as a bolder, brasher console to attract teenagers to a new, more edgy gaming experience. Nintendo had resurrected the games industry by targeting children, as well as making games which parents would view as family-friendly. However, these gamers had grown up and wanted to play games befitting their age. But by going after the teenagers, Sega also knew that younger players would be attracted to the Mega Drive, as generally speaking, younger kids always want to do what the cool older kids are doing. Disney, well, didn't really fit this, but then Sega were also looking at recognisable names to sell games, and there were few more ubiquitous fictional characters than Mickey Mouse. These Disney games were not the first, and certainly not the last licensed properties which Sega used to try and grab the attention of both the existing and potential gamers. Michael Jackson also licensed his name to Sega for Moonwalker, Ayrton Senna allowed his name to be attached to Super Monaco GP2, and Joe Montana had his name plastered all over an American football game. Nintendo was synonymous with video games, Mario was as famous as Mickey Mouse, and so what better way to get people to notice your new games console than with the best known mascot of them all, Disney, and of course Mickey Mouse. 3 main games came from this license, all of them created by Sega themselves, but with certain Disney standards applied. The main and obvious one was that instead of lives, you had tries. Mickey and Donald weren't allowed to die, see, they simply keeled over and had another go. Things never got too dark and there was a definite cartoon feel to the games, and Sega really did stay true to what gamers expected from the House of Mouse. The first of the games which Sega released was Castle of Illusion starring Mickey Mouse. Developed by AM7, also known as Team Ancient, the game follows Mickey as he tries to rescue Minnie Mouse from the evil Mizrabel. She's kidnapped his girlfriend so she can take her youth. Anyway, all very fairy tale, and you have to admit, sounds a bit like a kid's game. The thing is that while it sounded and looked like something for younger gamers, the gameplay was actually very polished and did present a proper challenge. Mega Drive and Genesis games were often accused of being far too easy, something which was especially true for the Sonic games. I would go as far as to say that Castle of Illusion was actually too hard on the normal setting. I'm not claiming to be any good at video games, but I struggled to get past the 3rd level due to a particularly challenging boss. It's fair to say that this game has caused more swearing and tears over Disney than anything but Michael Eisner. Now, there was an easy difficulty setting, but this was way too easy and was pretty much just a practice. You played the first sections of the first 3 levels, with most of the enemies removed, and at the end you bribed the evil witch with 3 gems. Yes, perhaps not the best message to be giving children.
He says never go anywhere with men or ladies you don't know.
And don't forget that if a witch steals your girlfriend, then give them some gems, or better still, give it to me.
On normal difficulty, the game consisted of 5 main levels, with the first 3 ending with a boss, and each time you defeated one, you got one of the 7 gems you had to collect before you could face Mizrabel. The next 2 levels had 2 gems each, one at the midpoint and one at the end of the boss fight. The game starts on the ground floor of the castle and through an enchanted forest with trees, spitting flowers and toadstools which want to take away one of the player's tries. You also made your way through some spiderwebs before fighting a large tree. The second level takes place in Toyland, where a military coup appears to have taken place. Well, that's the only reason I could think of for the number of clockwork soldiers who are after you. One of the interesting things about this level was that there are sections where you could send the screen upside down, and if you timed it right, you could get rid of a few irritating enemies in the process. Level 3 goes back to the forest, only it appears this time that Judgment Day is in full swing, as the skies burn with fire, and there's undead fish trying to jump and bite your ass. This was a pretty challenging level. mostly because of the bats, which could fly faster than a blackbird, and the end boss, who was an absolute pain in the arse to dispose of. Damn him! Once you defeated the green git, a new staircase would materialise, allowing players to progress to the library. It's not like any library I've ever seen, as you could walk into milk bottles and teacups, which would in turn take you to a land of milk and cake. Yum yum! This game really did feel like a Disney game. The development team behind it may have been better known for Shinobi and the vigilantism of Streets of Rage, but from the graphics to the stages, this was very much classic House of Mouse. After defeating the Red Loch Ness monster, it was up to a final staircase, past medieval knights in order to make your way through a clock mechanism, and eventually to the final battle with Miserabel. Overall, this was a very well made game. The difficulty level was far higher than you would expect from a Disney platform game on the Mega Drive, but it was fun and the graphics were of a very high standard for its time. It's also worth remembering that it was released in 1990, when developers were still getting to grips with the console.